This Honorable House resume its sitting. First, I'd like to apologize for the technical difficulties that we're having today. Um, Honorable Ben, you may resume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, like anyone of this team is aware of the potential issues with technology would be me. As someone who's been through and down this road here, and it's still happening, Mr. Speaker. And it seems like when we go live, it's when it kicks in. Um, but nonetheless, I'll soldier through and try to do the people's work. That's what I know, and that's what I will continue to do as long as the people of the district allows me to do so. And on that note, I want to firstly, before I begin, Mr. Speaker, thank the people of the 8th District, as I customary do at every budget debate, for the awesome privilege to represent their interests in this honorable House of Assembly. Mr. Speaker, there's no day passes that I don't appreciate the responsibility that I have, not just to the people of the 8th District, but to this entire territory. And all of us, all 13 of us, who've been elected by the ballot to represent the interests of the people of the Virgin Islands. Mr. Speaker, the Appropriations Act 2022 is one of the most important pieces of legislation that any administration pass in any given year. It guides the direction of the territory. It guides and sets the standard in terms of the economic activity that will take place. Considering in BVI that the government of the Virgin Islands is the biggest consumer of goods and services in the territory, it behooves us to take the responsibility, and many persons in the public space looks forward to the budgetary process to ensure that they could see the direction that we're going as a country, and there goes the direction of our economy. So, Mr. Speaker, as I start my contributions, I have to reflect on the past process in terms of our signing finance process and the process that got us to this point. Like the honorable member for the 3rd District, I have similar sentiments in terms of the direction that I see this process heading. So, Speaker, this is my 10th budget exercise since I've been elected in this honorable House, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I've noticed the continued, as the member mentioned as well, and I concur, degradation of the process, degradation of the institution as relates to this very important process, be it the budget and the Appropriation Act that we embark on every year, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was particularly disturbed in terms of how the process, how we was shoveled forward and shoveled on through the process, Mr. Speaker. This process, as I said earlier, is critical to the economic well-being of many persons in this territory. The government of the Virgin Islands is the biggest consumer and employer in this territory, Mr. Speaker. And we have to take this process extremely serious. We have to be meticulous in terms of ensuring that we go through the process and we ensure that the process is executed to the highest standard. Speaker, the rush through the process, members being told that's the last question, especially members of the opposition, who don't have the privilege or the opportunity to sit down beforehand with the ministries and departments. We don't have the privilege of sitting within caucus or cabinet to be preview to the discussion and discourse of the direction, is particularly that the executive is proposing to move forward. And when you get the documentations, for the most part, late or just before meetings is unacceptable, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we need to be careful, and I continue to say this, in terms of the House of Assembly as the institution, that we're not going down a slope, and I think we have already gone down that slope of compromising the institution. It is something that I continue to say. The legislative process, it's a very important process. We tend to call this process of the three branches of government. We continue to say that we should be held in the highest esteem, but our actions must reflect, and our behavior must reflect what we're purporting in terms of this institution. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, and I have to say this before I go into the details of my contribution here this evening, is that more than ever, the House of Assembly is becoming an extension of the executive, which is a dangerous place for us to be as a territory. Just because more than ever, the level of banter that took place in the Standing Finance Committee, especially the chairman and his behavior towards duly elected members of this House, his behavior towards senior public officials, Mr. Speaker, is unbecoming of this institution, and it's something that has to stop. That level of behavior has to stop, Mr. Speaker. We need to uphold the highest integrity of this institution at all times, even when persons aren't watching, Mr. Speaker. And it says to me, Mr. Speaker, and I believe more and more, that we have to ensure that these committee processes are held publicly so that people could be aware of what's happening in committee. It is their business. It is their money. The discussions are concerning their livelihoods and their lives. And it's important for us to ensure that we are transparent in all aspects of our representation. And I want to put that on the record that we need, while we're going through the process of evaluating all the things that we need to evaluate as far as the Constitution in this institution, these proceedings need to be public. And I'm going to double down again in terms of the constitutional review. The Speaker of the House of Assembly needs to be duly elected by the people to avoid the allegiance to politics that blows this institution, Mr. Speaker. And I want to make sure that that's firmly on the record before I begin my contribution this evening, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and I want to make sure that I respect, as I talk about respect for the institution and the duly elected members of this House. Could you tell me at what point I start so that I make sure I can have proper timing to ensure that I don't disrespect your rule that you put in place this evening, how much time that I have left so I could have a proper check
I
while I
don't,
think.
I, I don't remember. You actually will be the last speaker for the night, because we will close off at 9. So
Okay,
basically we started before we started at like 7 o'clock. So at 9 we close off.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to be clear.
You're welcome.
So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, the Appropriation Act 2022 is an extremely important, and I believe the most important piece of legislation that this Honorable House passes every year, every budget cycle. Mr. Speaker, sometimes before we move forward, it is important to provide context to avoid the con, as some like to say. We need to put text to it and ensure that the people get the full picture in terms of whence we came and where we are currently in the maturation and development of our country. Mr. Speaker, the BVI, unlike many countries, have experienced some of the most devastating disasters, um, man, man, natural disasters over the last 3 to 4 years, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 2017, we experienced the trifecta of the August floods, two category storms in the name of Hurricanes Irma, Category 5, storms in the names of Hurricane Irma and Maria, that left this territory devastated. All of us at the time who were here in the BVI, particularly after Hurricanes Irma, saw a level of destruction that left our territory, that was left after Irma's wake. Mr. Speaker, the administration at the time had no time to wallow in self-pity and sorrow. It was important for us to move forward to rebuild this country and get the BVI back on track. Mr. Speaker, in 18 and 17 months after the passage of Hurricanes Irma, Maria, we had general elections, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's important for me to say this, and I think it's important for the record to reflect the $3.5 billion in damages that was estimated after the wake of Hurricane Irma, Maria, and the subsequent work that was done in the 17 months leading up to the last general elections. Mr. Speaker, when this government took office in February of 2019, as of March 1st, they had in the public coffers under $180 million, Mr. Speaker. They had a clearly defined plan for the recovery and development of this country. There was an agency that was charged with the responsibility of moving and developing this country forward, Mr. Speaker. You had where the housing program that the good minister just spoke about and the processes that follow in terms of that process and that program was in place. This excludes the $175+ million that was left in all public funds. $50 million was allocated to fund that program from the reserve funds. You had a $65 million loan to fund the infrastructural recovery works of this territory, Mr. Speaker, that was in place, projects in place, projects that you're seeing now being executed by that funding that was secured in 2018. So sometimes, Mr. Speaker, when I listen to the rhetoric surrounding the projects that are happening, you feel that somehow they just fell out of the sky, and the funding fell out of the sky. And there's a word, and I see a lot of teachers on this call currently. I think we have 4 teachers on this call. There's a word that you ascribe to persons who take others' work and don't give credit for it. It's called plagiarization. And Mr. Speaker, the work that was done to ensure that those projects that you're seeing executed right now was done in the 17 months. And I need to emphasize this. The 17 months after the trifecta, the most devastating disaster that this territory has ever seen. Within 17 months, you had $180 million in reserve and funds within the government coffers, a clear, detailed plan to move this country forward for the recovery and development. You had an agency established to execute the recovery of this infrastructure in our territory. You had $65 million secured to fund those particular recovery projects, at least the infrastructural part of the recovery projects. You had a housing program established, well detailed, documented, with $50 million funding to seed funding to get that project moving. And you had a $40 million loan guarantee proposed to be able to fund, just a matter of the process of negotiating the details to fund the process of moving forward, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, where this is a fourth budget. This is the fourth budget that this territory or this administration is being executed. It was said that the actual 2019 budget, and it was the soundboard of the debate, that the 2019 budget isn't their budget. It's a transitional budget, as they were saying. A transitional budget, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that transitional showed that the BVI, coming out of such a disaster, as disasters of 2017, was stronger within 17 months because of planning, because of engagement with our stakeholders, but because of a clear vision for moving this country forward. Mr. Speaker, tourism numbers in 2019, the transitional budget that we speak of, were the third highest in the history of this territory's tourism numbers. That is after, think about this, after $3.5 billion in damages. Financial services had the most revenue ever collected in 2019 because of the work that was done 17 months prior to transition this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I say that because it's important for us to lay the foundation in terms of the hand that was dealt to this administration. The strong footing in terms of economy, the strong footing in terms of a plan to move and develop our infrastructure, the strong footing in terms of our strength in our financial services industry. Even more so that we've heard in our last standing finance discussions with the BVI Finance, is that the work that was done, particularly the work for economic substance and the way it was moved forward, has done BVI well in terms of transitioning to economic substance in terms of our financial services industry. So we can now start there with financial services. Because financial services, I need to speak about, and I've asked, from in 2019, I've reflected on my notes in terms of the particular questions that I've asked in the House. I've asked for us to have a clear discussion as a House. Financial services is one of those subjects that as a territory, as political leaders, we've never tried to play politics with. I thought at the time it was important for us to have that conversation in terms of the pathway forward. And the member for the second spoke about this today. Plan. The pathway forward, particularly as to how we're going to navigate the turbulent times that we saw ahead, and particularly how are we going to ensure that economic substance and that our people on the ground benefit from economic substance. As we see the true potential, and we see that there's tremendous potential for our people as it relates to economic substance and moving forward economic substance, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to this date, Mr. Speaker, to this date, we've yet to have that conversation on this industry, this very critical and vital industry. to the livelihoods of our people, our industry that we've seen based on COVID, we've depended on more and more, and we've milked it to the point where it has literal no more to go unless we start to really strategically look at how we're going to maximize the ancillary services affiliated with financial services, and particularly the paradigm of economic substance, to speak of. Again, we don't have a clear plan, to speak of. Just because I look at this budget and I listen to the rhetoric and how it's being ascribed and described, Mr. Speaker, it reminds me of a tale of two cities. Am I really what I'm hearing and what I'm reading in terms of the details in the budget? They don't match up, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm gonna go as we should have in the standard finance process, line by line, in some instances, because I think it's important for the people who are not previewed to the details to get the details, and the devil's in the details, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, as I said, when I listened to the speech this morning given by the Honorable Premier and his Minister for Health, I wonder if I am in the same, if there's a different budget book that the members have, the members of the government side has that we in opposition don't have. Mr. Speaker, and we'll go through that particular process. Mr. Speaker, I firstly would like to ascribe my comments, the comments of the member for the second, particularly on the business sector. And I think he was in my head when he mentioned that. I think it's important for us, particularly during this COVID era, to acknowledge the amazing job that our businesses have done. Those who have kept afloat, those who have reinvented themselves, and those persons who have found ways and found opportunities where many others saw despair in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic and opportunities that have arise from the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, the BVI, and I want to make sure, and I have a role to play as opposition leader, but I also have to be responsible, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the realities on the ground in terms of where we are. No one is denying the impact of the effects of COVID-19. No one's in denying the challenges that businesses have faced and individuals have faced with COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, and I want to at this time acknowledge and give my condolences to the latest person who has lost their life to COVID-19 and all the other persons and the families who have lost persons to COVID-19 over the last 2 years, close to 2 years, Mr. Speaker. My heart goes out to you, your families, the loved ones who have been left behind. And I too would like to urge persons to continue to do and take the necessary steps to stay safe. But like, Mr. Speaker, like what the last administration faced with one of the worst disasters ever faced in this territory, and even some would say in the region, in terms of the trilogy, in terms of the hurricanes and the floods. You face disasters head on, and you face them focused, and you have to have a plan and a vision for moving forward, Mr. Speaker. We cannot continue to throw darts against the wall or throw things against the wall and hope that something sticks, Mr. Speaker. We have to clearly have a focused and articulated plan and a vision for moving forward, Mr. Speaker. And the policies, and I'm going to focus now on the policies of the government should not be a hindrance to businesses and businesses moving forward. The businesses, particularly the tourism industry, has done a marvelous job of marketing the industry, keeping persons abreast in terms of the movement for BVI going forward, for ensuring that the customers, the repeat customers, know that every step of the way where we're going. And I want to commend those persons who we're now seeing the fruit and the benefits of the work of those persons within the industry to get persons coming to the territory. BVI is a strong brand, and persons will continue to come to the BVI. We have to be able to facilitate and make it comfortable for persons to come here, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, but also we have to ensure that as a government and as a territory, we cannot put undue pressure on our businesses, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we talk about, and I spoke about this at length, particularly the port and the raise in port fees that were raised in a time when businesses could ill afford that raise in port fees, Mr. Speaker. A time where we are seeing global economic pressures that are forcing the cost of goods and so the goods around the world to increase. Mr. Speaker, BVI imports over 90 plus percent, 99.9% of the goods we use in this territory, Mr. Speaker. At a time when businesses and consumers are at their lowest, is not a time for us to add additional taxes to those things. That's another example of the government's policies creating additional hardship and burden on the businesses and on the consumers. We see where the inflation has gone up on the cost of goods in the territory, in addition to what were the global pressures that we're experiencing. We're seeing where the government had to retract the fees from Electricity Corporation to avoid that level of inflationary action to go on the consumers at the end of the day. So it shows where the government and its policies are continuing to create hardship on the people of this territory, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, businesses in the BVI in particular requires a level of imported skilled labor to be able to function. It requires that our people, our business owners who have certain specialty areas that need certain skilled laborers need a government to be facilitatory. And I want to be clear on this point because I know these things could be misconstrued and go out in the public. Because the reality is that if we, based on the BVI's economy and the size of the BVI's economy, if we have full employment of all BVI landlords and we send out all the persons that come to the BVI and work, the economy will collapse. The BVI economy is such that it requires investment, persons coming from external to be persons providing some of the labor, the skilled labor that we need. And we need to focus on where we could transition in terms of people as much areas as possible. I think is wherever it's possible. But businesses required a level of imported labor to be able to function. So Speaker, we now have a situation where our labor department has put and created additional hardship for persons and businesses to operate in the territory. So Speaker, you have a labor minister, my good friend, making comments that we will flush them out wherever they are. And this was done in September 2020. Go back and look it up, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at a time where businesses have been down, many of them, for over 16 to 18 months, a time where now the economy is beginning to move again, Mr. Speaker, and we're now putting undue red tape and pressures on these businesses to get the skills that they need to get the economy, especially long-serving employees who've been working with these establishments. They speak of work permit renewals, and we learned this during the standing finance process. It's taken in excess of 3 months. It seems like the average now is 3 months for renewal of a work permit. Don't talk about a new permit. A business that has been down for 16 to 18 months, trying to get themselves back up on their feet, have to now struggle under the burden of the policy of this administration to get themselves moving. Just because that is where the government policies are creating hardship on businesses going forward. To speak on marine industry, and I have to touch on this area pretty quickly. To speak on marine industry, and we had the opportunity to have a conversation with the shipping registry and the customs department, particularly to speak on this issue of the marine industry, Mr. Speaker, to get a clearer understanding in terms of what's happening and the concerns that are being raised publicly on this industry. Mr. Speaker, I want to first and foremost say I respect the Customs Department, the Shipping Registry, and our law enforcement agencies who are out there and a joint task force that has been established to keep our borders safe, to keep the illicit trafficking of persons, contraband, and all the different things that happens on the sea. I want to commend those officers, those brave officers, for their work that they've done, for their constant sacrifice that they put out every day, and the families that they put out every day to keep us safe while we're at home. They're on the high seas at nights and spending long hours, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have to also be measured in our approach in terms of these industries, these very critical industries to our economy. Mr. Speaker, while I appreciate the legislative framework that is in place to put certain things in place for the particular marine industry, there are two particular areas of concern for me, Mr. Speaker. And I know that this is, and as I go through it and I discuss it with the technocrats and I discuss it with persons who are operating with the industry, this could not have been the intent of the legislation, Mr. Speaker. The issue surrounding the cruising permit, Mr. Speaker, is an issue of grave concern to me, because as you look at it, and I sat down the other day and I talked to someone in the industry and I talked to someone who operates in the space. If you're doing transfers from BVI to US Virgin Islands, if you leave Western to do a transfer, to go to St. Thomas, to pick up someone to come back in, I cannot see where that is envisaged that is a cruising, you need a cruising permit for those transfers, Mr. Speaker. Just because we have a situation where our economy, particularly our tourism economy, has been down for over 18 months. We're now seeing some life. We're now seeing where those persons who operate in that space see some opportunities to get themselves back up and running, get themselves moving again. And we cannot continue to nickel and dime our guests during that process. I could understand if a person is cruising between islands back and forth and are going out on a cruise, that one have to pay a cruise, but a paid cruise, they have to pay a cruising commit. When you leave the BVI waters to go from West End to go to St. Thomas, it's less than 5 minutes out of West End. You're in USVI waters. Why am I asking persons to pay a cruising permit where you're moving back and forth less than 5 minutes? Where's the cruising in that process? And I don't think that was the intent of the law. I think we as legislators have to look closely. If the law is explicit in that sense, that is something that we need to adjust, because we can't seem to be pricing ourselves on nickel and diamond or guests that are coming to our territory through this process. Mr. Speaker, and there's also the issue of movement in and around the territory. Speaker, and I heard the argument made by the Customs Department, and I respect that argument, but we can't be so judicious with the process, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to me, it's akin to me being a taxi driver. And I am taxi driver and I have my on duty and off duty the button. I'm off duty. I'm moving friends and family in my bus. But the regulator is still telling me that they have to pay a toll to move in my bus. And that's what's happening in many cases, in essence, with persons who are moving around internally and cruising within the Virgin Islands. So, Speaker, that is something as well that we need to look at. We know that there are persons who are trying to game the system and try to say that they're not on a paid charter. I think that there are aspects of that where we could address and capture and be able to deal with. But specifically, the issue of the local moving back and forth. And Mr. Speaker, and I want to say this on the record. Mr. Speaker, the period when persons couldn't come to the BVI and boats couldn't come to the BVI, it is those same persons, local boaters, local persons who are moving back and forth that kept places like Jasmine Dyke, the Willie Tees, and those areas afloat and kept them buoyant during the very difficult times that they were experiencing. White Bay, Great Harbor, those local boaters, and whatever little money that they had to spend to enjoy some type of normalcy during these very difficult COVID times are the ones who kept that local tourism businesses afloat, Mr. Speaker. And now that they have an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to make a little money, we have to be careful that we don't hammer them and bring down the hammer with them. And I understand that the department is working with them. And I want to say this, Mr. Speaker, even within the financial services space, when there are legislations that haven't been implemented or are to be implemented, we allow transitional periods. We allow a period where our agents and our companies get the opportunity to transition and get themselves up to speed. And I want to implore, if this is being done, to continue to do this, to allow that segment, that local segment of our business to get a chance to transition. I'm hearing now, and I had conversation with persons who are operating now over the weekend, and they're saying to me, look, most of the boats are grounded. The customers are saying, look, we want to have the cruise experience within the Virgin Islands. I don't have enough boats to carry persons around to make it happen. We need to find a way to get those boats back up and running. And that's where we have a responsibility as a government to help persons transition. And the reality is that it's very costly for a lot of those boaters and those guys to get themselves ready at this time. They need to have a level of transition. I would never advocate for persons not to fulfill their obligations under the law. We have to ensure that we give them an opportunity to properly transition. And maybe this is being done. And maybe this is the case. But I want to make sure that it's clearly on the record that I'm for us making sure that we have a proper transition to allow more of those boats to be able to get into the water, facilitate the upsurge that we're seeing right now with persons coming into the territory and moving our guests in and around their excursions, particularly the guests that are coming on the cruise ships. That's one aspect of the business that a lot of persons love, the day trips, the excursions around the Virgin Islands. We need to find a way to support our boys in that industry, or boys and girls who operate in that space, to get themselves up and running, to be able to facilitate the upsurge that we intend to see coming in to this particular industry. But Mr. Speaker, I want to again say to the team at Customs and the team at the Joint Task Force and thank them for their stellar work that they've done in terms of keeping our borders safe and protecting our borders during these very difficult economic times for all of us. Mr. Speaker, I'm now gonna take, since I have the floor to myself all night, the painstaking task of going through some of the details within the budget and the budgetary process. So, Mr. Speaker, I crave your indulgence to allow me to refer to my notes as I go through this process, Mr. Speaker.
Until, yeah,
Mr. Speaker, I want to first off say that there are two ways in which governments fund their operations. It's either through increase in revenue, or you raise revenue, you continue to raise revenue, or it's through borrowing, external borrowing. And this is this government's fourth budget, Mr. Speaker. And in their fourth budget, we're seeing where they're still riding a loan that was approved in 2018. They're still riding the infrastructural development of this country through the CDBRL Recovery Development Loan, even within their forward budget, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we had projected by this government in the last budget new revenues in the way of $24 million, Mr. Speaker. And of that $24 million, $1.2 million was realized, Mr. Speaker. So it says the revenue initiatives that are being proposed are not practical, one, are not yielding the necessary fruits that this government envisioned, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have to clearly look and look at where we can finance the recovery of this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the country is bursting at the seams in terms of our infrastructure. The government is talking about building a state-of-the-art government in terms of e-government and e-services and ensuring that those services transform the way we do business as a territory. And I'm all for that. And anyone who knows me knows that that is something that I support, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, where's the money? Mr. Speaker, if you look at the budget, you look at this government's budget and their vision as they claim to transform the services of this territory. So, Speaker, we have $100,000 budgeted for government services. Speaker, $100,000 can't even buy a server. The servers that we need to move these services forward. But yet, the selling point is that we're transforming the government and e-services and with digital economy and all these type of things. But the reality on the ground is that there's no money to finance it. Smoke and mirrors, Mr. Speaker. Where are we going to finance the government process? Speaker, this $100,000 is less than what we're purporting to pay for the speaker's legal case. And we're serious about transforming our economy into a digital economy. Speaker, we talk a lot, and I'm going to speak about this now under the Premier's office, Mr. Speaker. We talk about a lot about diversification and diversifying our economy. And one of the key areas that we've talked about this, and particularly this, and the minister responsible, and this project wasn't under his ministry, but he ultimately is the ministry responsible, is sports tourism. There's an opportunity for us to really diversify our economy through sports, and particularly through the projects that we started up in the 7th and 8th district, particularly the stadium that was partnership with the BVI Football Association. Mr. Speaker, just Sunday, and one of the visions that was outlined for that particular area was to develop a sporting corridor, Mr. Speaker, that creates economic activity, not just for that community, but economic opportunities that span the gamut of the Virgin Islands in all different aspects, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, more than $1 million was invested from the government. There was a commitment that was made to ensure that that project was finalized. The BVI Football Association is in the process of putting out to tender the stadium to be built to move that project forward. And this is our fourth budget. And we have to commit $250,000 to finalize the track and the other facilities that would support building a product that could start the process of diversifying our economy. I don't know, Mr. Speaker, if you've seen the number of persons that are in that facility during game time. Right now, there's a tournament going on, and you see persons lying to watch the games. So imagine if we bring international games to the BVI and this initiative, and move this initiative forward. The potential for us to not just develop opportunities within the 7th and 8th district, but beyond that, in terms of the opportunities economically for our entire territory. And the member for the 7th is aware of this. We've had these conversations. It's important for us to move this project forward. But yet, we talk about diversification. And there's no money there for that project once again in the budget, Mr. Speaker. Zero. And if it's there somewhere and I'm not seeing it, I am sure that my good colleagues on the other side will tell me where to find it. But I'm still looking. All I see is a dash, Mr. Speaker. We're not serious. We talk the talk. We have the rhetoric in terms of sports tourism diversification. We have the rhetoric, government initiatives. We're going to green the economy. We're going to go paperless. We're going to do all these things, but the money in the budget doesn't back the talk that we're going to bring these things to fruition. Again, smoke and mirrors. And the public needs to know that we're not serious about the things that we're talking about. Gone are the days when we could continue to just milk the financial services industry without coming up with a serious plan for the economic diversification of this country and a serious vision for moving our economy to the next level. The budget doesn't reflect that. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to move while I'm on the Ministry of Education. I'm going to continue to, in the Premier's office, but I'll segue to the Ministry of Education while I talked about the football stadium, Mr. Speaker. The Minister has had a difficult time over the last 4 to 6 months. I know the members speak about the strikes and the different things that are happening with our school infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. And I sympathize with the minister because at the end of the day, education is critical to all of us. I think one of the key components of our economy, we're talking about strengthening our economy. The strength in our economy is based on the education in the educated population. BVI over the years has done a tremendous job in ensuring that its people is educated. Started with the late Honorable Hamilton Lavity Stout, Mr. Speaker, and the work that he had done to lay the foundation for the importance of education and educating our people. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to see, and I don't know if this number is revised, that there's $1 million allocated to address some of the infrastructural needs with our schools and the needs with our facility, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in terms of sports and sporting facilities, we're not serious with sports, Mr. Speaker. We're not serious. And Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, you, someone who has been involved in sports and understand the importance of sports in this territory, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I look through the budget and I see what is allocated to sports and the development of sports in this country, Mr. Speaker, a paltry $50,000. Subhead 32550 400. Look it up. If you think I'm misquoting, Mr. Speaker. $50,000 for the sports facilities of this territory. Mr. Speaker, even worse. Even if you said that you could use the development budget to address the issue in terms of the facilities and so forth in the territory, Mr. Speaker. Voila. You have a robust 50 grand for development projects in the Ministry of Education and Culture. Mr. Speaker, we're not serious. Our rhetoric and the reality in terms of the budget does not reflect, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, then we talk about fishing and farming, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have had, and bear with me, Mr. Speaker, as I navigate through my budget book, it's important for me to ensure that the public's aware of the numbers and not the rhetoric, to get a clear sense in terms of the reality and making sure that these particular proposals and the pie in the sky dreams, how are we going to make them work? Mr. Speaker, one of the key areas that we've discussed as a true potential for diversification of the economy is through our fishing, more so fishing, and particularly for self-sustenance of farming industry, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've discussed this industry at length. I know there are many plans that were in final stages in terms of ways in which we can move this industry forward. Because we took $6+ million from a grant handled by Social Security to give to persons, some of whom are in the industry, some of whom don't even, if they saw a plant pot, would know what a plant pot look like. It would tell you that, would know that's a plant pot, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, some people I heard one guy got 15 grand to go for a fishing and farming grant. Fishing grant. Went fishing and I had to tie the hook for him. He couldn't even tie the hook to put the line on the hook, to put the hook on the line. To tie the line to put the hook on, Mr. Speaker. We mismanaged, Mr. Speaker, and I want to commend those fishers and farmers who are legitimate fishers and farmers who got an opportunity to sort of invest in their craft, to continue to build their craft, Mr. Speaker. I want to employ them. I want to congratulate them for the support that they got, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have young farmers and fishermen in this country. I have a young man in Virgin Gorda, Janai, doing an exceptional work in terms of the farming industry. And I doubt, and yet I have to confirm, but the last time I heard, he hasn't gotten a dime to ply his craft, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have a young man in all along, look, the 7th and 8th district, young boy. I can't remember his first name, but I know him as Bambi. One of the sought after livestock farmers in this territory, not just in Eastern Isle Community, but in this territory, provides livestock and meat for various persons around this territory. Not a dime. And we're saying that we're serious about this industry. $6 million plus that we send down the drain like we're sending down the 20 plus $1 million from water and sewage down the drain. Just because here what we have in the budget. To add insult to injury, Mr. Speaker. We've destroyed a perfectly functioning space at Bargers Bay. We mowed it down. There were monies there available from the insurance to make some minor repairs, to make the repairs that are necessary. We could have used that space in the interim until we're ready for fishing and farming. Have storage, fix the storage capacity in terms of the fish, the freezers and so forth, Mr. Speaker, and address that issue. We mowed that particular space down, Mr. Speaker, to create parking. So for 3+ years, since 2019, there's no storage capacity for our fishermen and fisher folks. We're in a fourth budget. No. And here's what we're and here what here and listen to what we've allocated in the budget to address in the capital expenditures section. Subhead 325 3006 for those who are following me. $50,000 in 2022. We've allocated $50,000 to the development of a fishing complex in the BVI. We're going to put up a tent, Mr. Speaker. That is what our vision is for fishing. This is where we spent $6 million on grants. We don't have a functioning abattoir. Persons don't have anywhere to go and kill their livestock. Speak of Virgin Gorda, the space that's supposed to be for the farm, the officer there. So it's a wasteland. Working from home. And we're serious about this industry and diversifying of the economy. Speaker, it's clearly we don't have a plan. What we have is a lot of rhetoric, a lot of talk to mislead and fool the public that we have all these grandiose ideas to move this country forward. But the money doesn't back up the chat. I know a farmer and I know a fisherman who got farming grant, got almost as much as we have budgeted now from the grant program. He got in a grant almost the same amount that we have budgeted to move that industry forward. Are we serious, Mr. Speaker? Are we serious? Mr. Speaker, we cannot be serious based on the monies that I'm seeing, Mr. Speaker, in this budget for moving this industry forward. I'm hearing that we're having plans to build both the abattoir, the abattoir and the fishing complex up in the bottom of Paraquita Bay, Mr. Speaker. How are we going to build that, Mr. Speaker? This is our fourth budget. Where's the money going to come from? Mr. Speaker, where is the money going to come from? Speaker, look at a stark contrast, Mr. Speaker. We looked at, and I asked some question. I asked it particularly for a reason, because I think we need to see, and the public needs to see, that this government's priorities are screwed up, are in the wrong places, Mr. Speaker. I asked a question in terms of legal funds that was garnered for legal support for the House of Assembly, Mr. Speaker. You see, when I said to this to the public, and I don't make these comments lightly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our system or institution is compromised, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when you have a House of Assembly over the last 3 budgets that have spent close to $500,000 on legal suit, and that's just the monies that were paid in, Mr. Speaker. That is not the pending invoices, Mr. Speaker. You're saying to me, and you're saying to the public that the mandate of the House of Assembly has changed. We're now responsible for litigation for the government of the Virgin Islands. Speaker, the House of Assembly has spent more money on litigation than the Attorney General's chambers. The Attorney General chambers has spent over the last 2 to 3 years less than $250,000 on litigation from their budget. But the House of Assembly has spent over $500,000 and counting, because we're in the court still with litigation on this matter of the COI. And that number is going to continue to rise, Mr. Speaker. And you're telling me that we're spending $100,000 on digitizing our economy and creating a digital economy? You're telling me that you have $50,000 budgeted for sports and development projects? You're telling me that to develop the fishing complex, you have $50,000 budgeted? And this is, and might I add, this is unbudgeted monies that was expended. Mr. Speaker, we are not serious. We are not serious, Mr. Speaker. And this dog and pony and dance and the song and dance that we're playing with the people of this territory, I have a responsibility to let the people know what's happening. The devil is in the details. The devil is in the details. $500,000 on the House of Assembly, but you find $50,000 to build a fishing complex. While a fishermen suffer. I spoke to a fisherman just a week ago, struggling with the ice box of his fish. He couldn't go out for days because he hasn't gotten the last catch that he had sold. He's constantly putting ice on these fish. He has to come out the pocket. There's nowhere for him to go to sell his fish. When he's down in the market square, he's down around some corner somewhere. He's somewhere again in some corner, like a nomad, moving around, trying to get his catch, imply his trade. And we're saying that this is the third pillar of our economy that we're trying to diversify. Are we serious, Mr. Speaker? Are we serious? We cannot be serious, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, while we're in sports, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Education, I see we had a big ceremony just the other day, Mr. Speaker, to put air conditioning in the gym, in the sports, the multi-purpose sports complex, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it struck me when I saw the price, Mr. Speaker. I got a little taken back, Mr. Speaker. I said, let me just not judge and take my time, do my research, and find out if indeed that is what something like that values and costs before I go and say anything publicly on this matter, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, it looks like we're really focused on diversifying sports and sports tourism, because it seems like with that cost of that air-conditioned system, that we're moving into ice hockey and sport and skating and figure skating, Mr. Speaker. For that kind of cost, Mr. Speaker, we're going to put ice in the floors of the multi-sports sports complex to do ice hockey and sports skating. Mr. Speaker, this can't be serious. $50,000 for fishing ain't got nothing here for farming at all. But you're spending almost $800,000 on an air conditioning system. The wait it gets better, Mr. Speaker. So I started to dig, Mr. Speaker, to find out if this was tendered, and if it was tendered, who were the additional tenderers in this process, and why this particular system costs what it costs, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to my surprise, I came to understand that there was an additional tender, and the tendered amount from a reputable firm that has been in business and have been in this business for over 25 years, offering these type of services in and around the Virgin Islands, Mr. Speaker. That tenderer tendered $481,000 to put a system in the same facility. Was disqualified because he didn't write out the $481,000 in the bid in words. So you're telling me that you're willing to spend $304,000 over the cost for that system, for that facility, when you're budgeting these kind of paltry figures for critical areas of our economy, to flush additional monies down the drain at this time? Are we serious, Mr. Speaker, about this country? Have we not learned anything from the eyes of the COI and what we've gone through as a territory over the last several months, Mr. Speaker? Have we not learned anything? Over $300,000 beyond what that individual bid? We cannot be serious, Mr. Speaker, in these times of scarce revenue. But they're saying that there's certain bells in the air anyway, and they're not wedding, and it's not wedding bells, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have to stop this behavior of mismanaging public resources. So this is a travesty. We are gone from the days of Willard, the days of Lavity, the days of Ralph, and our former leaders of this country, Dr. Orlando Smith, where we tried to make $1 out of 15 cents and make $1 go further than it gone before. So now $1 million is not $1 million now only go as far as is now the new $500,000. Speaker, this is a travesty to our territory. And we had the heart to have a ceremony for that? To blatantly rub our mismanagement in the faces of the world, Mr. Speaker? So we talk about value for money, and I heard this Premier this morning, he spoke a lot about value for money. That's what we consider value for money. I guess this is one of the cows that the minister like to talk about in the road. It's one of those proverbial cows, eh? Speaker, we have to do better than this. We're under the mayor in the eyes of a commission inquiry. We cannot continue to mismanage the public funds like this, especially when we're not putting funds in areas to help grow and develop our economy, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, again, I'll transition into social development. $300,000 overrun based on the tenders that were submitted on that particular project, Mr. Speaker. We had the social development department come before us, outlining the social issues that we're facing as a territory, as a country. Mr. Speaker, we have persons in and around this territory who are going through one of the most difficult times ever. People are sleeping, cannot afford to pay rent. The social assistance from Social Security has gone up more than 600% from persons who are coming on a regular basis seeking assistance and seeking rent assistance, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have persons sleeping in around this territory in cars and in boats. Constantly, Mr. Speaker, you get the cries of persons. We have an assistance program that is running for my community, and I'll speak about my community at the tail end of my presentation, Speaker. And we're mismanaging money in this way. Speaker, I look at the budget from the Ministry of Health, and he looked at the areas where you have to support persons in these areas, the social areas where persons really need the support and the help to get themselves back on their feet and get themselves moving again. We say in some instances, those budgets have dropped as far as 33%. Our community services budget cut last budget cycle by 33%, $113,000. Our disability services budget, persons who are differently able, who needs that assistance, that budget was cut by $30,100, 7%. To speak our children and family support services budget was cut 16%. Some $136,400 was cut from the services to support those families in need. Speaker, our public health budget to support persons in need cut 24%, some $497,800, Mr. Speaker. Our social protection budget, protect our vulnerable persons and our vulnerable families, was cut some 12%, some $294,900, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our aged care services was cut some 8%. That's our golden gems that we like to talk a lot about, how we want to protect our golden gems. Their budget was cut some $186,900, Mr. Speaker. So at a time when COVID-19 has shown us the social needs of our country and what we need to do to address those social needs of our country, we've gone and cut the budget to support those persons. Cut the budget. But we're spending $500,000 on legal cases for the House of Assembly. We're spending an additional $300,000 on an air-conditioned system that we don't need to spend, as if we're diversifying into ice hockey and ice skating, Mr. Speaker. We have spent $6 million of pensioners' money from Social Security. These persons, vulnerable amongst us, who needs that support, we're cutting their budget. And don't talk about the $6 million plus we're spending on legal support for our international lawyers and our lawyers for the House of Assembly. Speaker, we cannot be serious about this, Mr. Speaker. of vulnerable, or most vulnerable persons amongst us were taken from, robbing from Peter. And you don't paying Paul. Somebody's getting paid. So this is unacceptable. And the public needs to know this. Not the rosy picture we continue to try to paint. The devil's in the details. Speaker, I don't know why my cousin insists on fighting with me, the member for the territorial member. I don't understand why he insists on fighting with me. Here it is. His vulnerable, his golden gems, the vulnerable members with disabilities, the vulnerable amongst our population. Budgets have been cut expeditiously. And you could stand and support all these other things, frivolous things, to pay for legal fees for a member who went rogue, who has spent over $500,000 of the public's purse and counting on legal defenses, to overspend $300,000 on an AC system in a gym, to spend close to $1 million on political consultants, to mismanage $6 point something million in fishing and farming grants, and businesses who are legitimate fishermen and business people have yet to get a cent in these very difficult times for their businesses and their activities. Are you talking about Humpty Dumpty? And everything around you falling down and falling apart? And you talking about Humpty Dumpty? Have you no shame? Have we no shame? Have we no compassion for the vulnerable persons within our society? Have we none? Mr. Speaker, have we none? Mr. Speaker, it's the elusive COVID-19 spending. Speaker, I ask once again in standing finance for a detailed outlay of the COVID-19 spending. Mr. Speaker, again, not forthcoming. Speaker, we need to ensure that that money that was allocated for COVID-19 is audited. We need to ensure that it's accounted for. Every penny needs to be accounted for, Mr. Speaker. I've asked more than twice or 3 times in the House of Assembly for those funds. They're yet to come. They're yet to come forward, Mr. Speaker. And we continue on this path. Again, I've asked in standing finance, and yet the details of the COVID spending of this administration has not been brought forward. Because we need to be transparent with the public's funds and the spending of the public's funds, Mr. Speaker. This is our 4th budget. The historians look at it, only could go back to 2011, or they only could remember certain things within this cycle. And every time you're on your 4th budget, but it's somebody else's problem. We blame COVID, and now we're even blaming the dead for some of these problems, Mr. Speaker. So we need to get our act together, Mr. Speaker. Our vulnerable persons within our society need our support. We cannot continue to ask the budgets that support these individuals. And this is not my words. This is the words, and I want to make sure it's clear. This is coming from the Ministry of Health's own report to the House. And the cuts that were made in those budgetary areas. And the differences and the variances to our most vulnerable within our society in a time when they're the ones need the support the most. Mr. Speaker, you guys see, I have a few more minutes. I'll move a little quicker because I don't want to I want to respect your wishes, sir, and I want to make sure that I get through within the time that was allotted to me. Mr. Speaker, we talk a lot about deficit spending, and that we were able to not put the country in deficit spending. I keep hearing that as a tagline. I think that that is one of the talking points for the upcoming season that is upon us, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, but we have to tell the full picture. We have to show the full picture. And we have to tell the entire story, Mr. Speaker. It's important for us to do that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have where we have where now, Mr. Speaker, the statutory organizations, the ones particularly who the government of the Virgin Islands is 100% responsible of. Mr. Speaker, the government has a responsibility when those statutory organizations are in trouble or facing financial difficulty to support those organizations through those difficulties, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have a government. It's talking about they haven't done deficit spending, but yet you have your statutory organizations owing, and I'll start with the Viva Airports Authority, owing vendors close to $1.8 million, over 120 plus vendors. And the aged amount for those bills are over 90 days. Well over 90 days, Mr. Speaker. This is where one of the line items that are owed to vendors is the visitor center that we were bragging about. We had big ceremonies, several ceremonies we had about that visitor center, the COVID visitor center, how it was built in the shortest period of time, is one of the most efficient buildings ever built, and we praise the contractor for the work that he did and the work that he did to build that building in the time that he built the building, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, do you know that up to this day, that contractor expended his own personal resources to build that building, is still owed some $106,000 a year later? December is going to make a year since that building was was built. Mr. Speaker, you cannot continue to say that you've managed to scale deficit spending, but you're running your country on the backs of the businesses. You've now have a taxpayers, one of your contractors' monies, $106,000. $106,000 for over a year. Haven't paid him, and you're not going to pay him interest. But if he doesn't pay his NHI on time, or he doesn't pay his taxes on time, he's charged a percentage on his on that late payment. But you, the government, is running your operations on the backs of the businesses in this territory. This is wrong. You can't pad your balance sheet and owing all these contractors and small businesses in this country. You're destroying the business sector in this country. You're not paying them any interest, but you're holding their monies for over a year. The Speaker, and one of those line items that is owed is almost $200,000 for insurance. Our facility went through the hurricane season. I don't know if it was insured because it owed over $200,000 in insurance. It is the government's responsibility. It is you are the shareholder. Nobody's disputing or denying what happened with COVID. Nobody's disputing those things. But you have a responsibility as the 100% shareholder to deal with those institutions. To add insult to injury, Mr. Speaker, we learned in standing finance that because of the dire straits of the Beaver Airports Authority, the officers, the employees, the NHI was taken out, their Social Security was taken out. And here's the kicker, Mr. Speaker. Their pension was taken out to the tune of over $206,000 and not paid into their pension fund. That's their salary. That's not the port's airport authority's contribution. That's the employee's contribution. Illegal. And we're bragging that we have, we're the one of the few without deficit spending, but you're running, you're not only running on the backs, your operation on the backs of the businesses, you're not running on the backs of your employees. It's because that removal of the funds from person's pension is criminal. And those employees need to be paid the interest that they would have accrued for the time that money was taken from their pension fund, Mr. Speaker. And the government has a responsibility to support the Beaver Airport Authority. They have a responsibility. But this is not just a problem for the statutory organization. It's the same as the ports. Additionally, the government, the last report that I got when I asked the question in the House of government's monies that is owed to vendors was close to $17 million that government owed vendors. Owed to vendors in this territory, Mr. Speaker. Because you cannot continue to brag about having these things and you're no deficit spending, but you're running your country. You're crippling. You're piling on the impact that these businesses are experiencing with COVID-19. Government is piling on by not paying its bills. Paint the picture. When you're painting a picture, don't just paint the rosy part of it. A rose got thorns in it too. Tell the full story. Tell the people the full story. Let's tell the people the full story. We have to put monies into these organizations that the government owns. We cannot allow them to continue to run their operations on the backs of the employees and on the backs of the businesses. Yeah, the reality is that it is what it is. But don't paint a picture that is not a true picture, Mr. Speaker. Tell the full reality. Share the facts. And these are not my numbers. These are the numbers that were given to me by these institutions. Because we like to say which numbers are right and we like to send things around on WhatsApp. I hope we send this around on WhatsApp too. Speaker, before I go, I have a few more areas I have to touch. The Eastern Long Harbor Development Project, Mr. Speaker. I have to touch that before I go. Mr. Speaker, I see that we have $480,000 in the budgeted to get the Fisherman Wharf built, Mr. Speaker. And that's important, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, right now I'm going into the last segment of my presentation. Last, but certainly by no means least, to talk about my community and the initiatives within my community, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that particular, and Mr. Speaker, it's important for me because when you hear certain chatter going around in the community, that certain things are escalating, and we're heading into what they call the silly season. People tend to make up things and fudge the truth, Mr. Speaker. And I took my time, and painstakingly so, to really go through this particular line item. I asked for some details from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor, which weren't forthcoming. But I got the information nonetheless, in terms of the details, in terms of the lands adjacent to the Red Bay area. I was very specific, Mr. Speaker, because there's some talks that are going around And one thing about me, and my grandfather gave me a story that, and I'll tell this quick story. He said that one day I was on the block in an argument, and he said that, called me and he said, look, let me tell you something. You see what you were there doing the other day? Don't let me ever hear you do that again. I said, Pa, why? I was just defending myself, defending the truth. And he said, if anybody passed and saw you and two of y'all arguing, they won't say, look at that idiot over there. They say, look at those two idiots over there arguing. So, Mr. Carr, I was sent here in this house to represent the facts. And I was painstakingly, I took my time on this issue because it's being said in certain quarters amongst the stalwarts of a certain organization about my involvement in certain things surrounding that particular Red Bay Dock area. So, Speaker, I asked the PS, particularly about the development that's happening there right now and about my involvement in that development. It's on the record that I had zero involvement in a development that is happening right now at the Red Bay Dock. In fact, I wasn't even contacted about the details of what was happening right there, Mr. Speaker. In fact, the property and the lease, the details surrounding that was executed under this administration. It was executed on this administration. And the neighboring adjacent property where the dock's supposed to go, where I fought and I continue to fight that the dock must go, but the landowner adjacent must get their fair share of whatever is to happen there with that project. Because the community has to benefit, and I believe the landowner has as has been the customary case, to benefit as well, Mr. Speaker. It is on record, my position on that, Mr. Speaker. And you're hearing around the community that I, Marlon Penn, Magdalene Ephraim Boy, trying to block persons from getting property in that community. Utter rubbish. Utter rubbish, Mr. Speaker. In fact, I have tried and I've tried to facilitate many discussions to ensure that that particular issue is finalized and dealt with. Because the community has that particular area has a level of kinship to the people of that community. And Dr. Charles Whitley wrote a book in particular speaking about the heritage of that area and its importance to the people of that community. So it's important for me in this life, and particularly the life in politics, your name is all you have. And you cannot stay silent and allow people to railroad your name in these simple talk up and down the community, Mr. Speaker. And I want to get, and Minister, I know you're listening, as I asked, the details of that particular project and the details surrounding that, we need to have that to form official part of the record, Minister. It hasn't reached to the clerk as yet, and it needs to reach the clerk because it needs to form an official part of the record of the standing finance deliberations. Mr. Speaker, Long Bay Beach. Speaker, the Minister and I have had these discussions, particularly concerning that facility and its importance, is grown in importance to the overall tourism product in this territory, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I see that there was a post the other day concerning the road and the cries of the people of the district has finally been heard. They haven't gone unnoticed, Mr. Speaker, and I wondered if that include the cries of their representative, who from 2019, and the records will reflect. I have it. I wrote it down because I want to make sure, Mr. Speaker, that the records accurately reflect accurately are accurately reflected as it relates to these matters, Mr. Speaker. Since 2019, I have been asking in this honorable house for that particular road to be addressed and fixed. I'm happy to see that we're making moves to try to get it addressed. But up until this moment was there, and I know and I understand the minister, he's trying his best, but he can't do it without money. Nothing has been done as to date. So I don't want it to go to the public to make it seem that their representative been fast asleep on the wheel and not representing their interests. I know they know better, but I want to make sure I remind them that there's some of us who are very skilled with our tongue. And sometimes the truth sometimes get a little twisted and people tend to forget. I have been fighting to ensure that that project get done and get done the right way. When I was in power, twice a year, we maintained that road. We had asphalt, we had the quarry waste, so we maintained it twice a year. Every 6 months, we maintained that facility, kept it maintained. We kept from Trailers Bay to the bridge maintained. We had 2 workers working on a daily basis to maintain the aesthetics in that area. Not because it's my district and my people deserve it. And yes, they do deserve a healthy environment, just like any other taxpaying resident deserves that. But it's what we want to present for ourselves. That's why we did that. Since 2019 budget, the money's disappeared to maintain the Beef Island area. The roads since 2019 stopped being, and at this point, I want to commend the persons who came out, who have given back to the community time and time again, those who've been paid, those who haven't been paid, so that we could have some type of facility to pass and to get to the beach. And the beach is very popular in the mornings. You could have upwards of 20 to 30 persons there enjoying the beach. I thank the minister for the restroom facility that he moved forward and got that completed. Minister, I want to thank you for your efforts to get that done. Minister, we need to now look at an ongoing maintenance of the beach. The challenge that we have with the beach right now is that the guys that are there are consumed with the sargassum. Almost on a daily basis right now, the seaweed comes up on the beach, and that in itself is a consuming process in terms of the maintenance of the beach. It takes up most of the time to maintain the beach. But I also want us to regularize the vending process on the beach. We talked about in 2019 to have a body in place to manage the beach. Right now, it's becoming a free for all on that beach, Minister. You and I have talked about this offline and the concerns that I have. I even see now, and I was shocked on Saturday when I walked past, and I see that there's a church, and they told me it's a church that holds services on the beach, built a structure on the beach. We got to get that under control, Minister. We can't allow that to be a runaway train. I mean, I can't sit by and allow the beauty and the ambience of what is Long Bay Beach be destroyed and degraded with chaos. We cannot allow chaos to prevail within on that facility, within that community. And I again plead publicly, Minister, let us get this under control. Let us fix the problem. Let's set up a clear process for vending on the beach. Let us build proper structures that person could pay rent, pay for the structures, and clearly outline what do we expect on that beach. I'm begging you, Minister, before it gets out of control where we can't pull the horse back in the barn. Speaker, Ministry of Communication and Works. Speaker, I want to first of all thank the minister, because I must say, and while I give criticism, my grandfather and my community has taught me to not be ungrateful and not be a hypocrite. And I want to thank the minister for his support, at least through the small allocation. I want to make a quick statement before I get into that, Mr. Speaker, because there's this perception is this perception that's being created that there's some person that tried to create that somehow us opposition members have at our disposal a pot of gold to deal with all the issues and concerns within our communities. I want to make it very clear to the public that is listening, particularly my forces within my district, particularly the opposition members. We're at the mercy of the ministers and the execution of the budgetary allocations that are within the budget. The responsibility and the sole responsibility of the allocation and the allotment of those funds is in the purview of the minister and the finance officers. What we have available to us as opposition members and district representative, all four of us, is our allocation within our committee, within or the House of Assembly. We have, I think is correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's $125,000 available to us in our district allocation. In many cases, Mr. Speaker, and I met this when I was elected in 2011, most of that money goes to persons within the communities. For my case, I met over $5,000 that was being spent to top persons in the communities who needed assistance, senior elderly persons in the community that need assistance and need support, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since I've been elected the last 10 years, I haven't changed any of those individuals who I saw there getting support. What I did is I add some persons additionally who needed help and persons who are going off the university. As someone comes back, they get support. So, Mr. Speaker, the bulk of that money goes to supporting persons additionally in the community who need help. So for persons who are in the community trying to perpetrate that somehow we have this pot of gold that we were refusing to cut the bush in our districts, refusing to clean the guts in our districts and do projects in our districts. It's false. It's irresponsible for us to perpetrate a story that we know is a lie, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, but I want to, and we're seeing now where the bush and the guts are being cleaned in our communities. And I want to thank the Minister of Finance and the Minister for Communication and Works for finally getting some monies to the people. And I've been advocating, I want to make it clear, I haven't just sat down. I've been advocated openly in the House of Assembly, in the public space on this issue of addressing these issues within our communities. Some of the guts in my community have been cleaned for the first time in 2 years. The gut leading from Paramtown, bottom up by David Penn, coming straight on to Paramtown. That's the first that's been cleaned in 2 years. And I've been advocated every day, religiously, the public works, to the minister, to get that particular thing done. So I want it on the record, because there are those in the community, and it's talking season, and they have a good way of misrepresenting the facts, the persons. But Flossie and Obelbar in lose his tongue. I'm going to speak, and I'm afraid to speak. Speaker, we have $200,000 allocated annually. We used to, but now I see it's been cut to $100,000 per district. That's the money that's been used, that we used to do little side projects within our community to help persons to get to the tertiary roads, to help put up a road that might be undermined. And I want to thank the minister for always facilitating me with that $200,000 to get the projects that I need done for the benefit of the people within my community. He could decide that he doesn't want to spend it the way that I want to spend it. But he has been always facilitative of myself and my people of my community to make sure that that limited funds that's being allocated gets spent the way it's supposed to be spent. But I want to say though, I'm disappointed because I heard a lot of rhetoric this morning about the infrastructure and how we're gonna redo the infrastructure of the territory and build infrastructure. And I looked in the minister's budget, minister, and I haven't seen the money. Can you tell me where the money is to do all these infrastructural works that we're doing? Luckily for you, minister, you inherited the $65 million from the CDB loan. Up to now, you still have $8 million budgeted to continue to do road works. Monies, the hard work and monies that were fought for by the last administration is still paying dividends today to build infrastructure. This government has not borrowed a dime other than $17 million to restructure a loan, to refinance a loan from Banco Popular to Scotia Bank, now Republic Bank. How are you going to build infrastructure if you're not going to borrow monies to build infrastructure? Your recurrent expenditure continues to rise. The limited resources that I see is budgeted for capital projects, less than $20 million when you count in the grants. When you take away the grants and the CDB loans, is less than 20, it's just over $20 million for capital infrastructure. And that is if financial services does well. Because if we're banking on gambling and medicinal marijuana and all these other areas that I see that we said that we're going to generate new revenue for in a digital economy where you only have $100,000 budgeted, no new revenues is going to come. So we need a plan to restructure our debt while interest rates are at their lowest. Restructure our debt, get better rates on the loans that we have already, and find ways to finance the building of our infrastructure. We're in our fourth budget. This administration is in its fourth budget. We can't be serious. Minister, I wish you luck. Because it can't happen with what I'm seeing here. The infrastructural issues that we have as a country, they're dire. They're dire. And if we're serious about growing and building the economy, we have to spend money on building our infrastructure. We have to spend money on developing our telecoms infrastructure. We need to look at the ways to ensure that if we're going to get into economic substance, like we talk about, we have a lot of rhetoric and a lot of talk, but the monies and the actions don't back it up. Our focus on spending our taxpayers' money is about giving it away in grants to people who don't fish or farm. To spend $300,000 more on an air-conditioned system that is not necessary when you could have gotten it way and a more cost-effective with a reputable firm in this country. Spending $1 million plus on political consultants and spending a bunch of money from the House of Assembly on legal fees and litigation. And our infrastructure gets no support, no funding to deal with the infrastructural needs of our country. While our people every day have to go through, drive treacherous roads to move forward. And before I move, Mr. Speaker, sewage. I must talk about sewage. Because every election is a big talk and they talk at infinitum. The last election they come up east and they beat the $8 million drum. Till they can't beat it anymore, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I asked for a report on how much money over the last 4 budgets have been spent on sewage in the Eastern Long community, Mr. Speaker. The $8 million that this government continues to beat a drum to and try to fool and misrepresent to the people, $6 million of that money has been paid back to the Treasury. And the Port Authority asked for a reprieve to pay back the other $2 million, Mr. Speaker. 4 budgets. 4 budgets has passed. They came eastern, up through Long Look, beating them drum about how they so care about Eastern Land, or people about the sewage issues. How much have they spent in 4 years to address the issue of sewage? The $6 million went back in. One contract I've seen in the budget over the last year that was spent, that was done down in Paraquita Bay, Wilkes Point, that was taken away from an existing contractor and put another contractor in place. That's the only project that was done to address sewage in my community, in our community, for 4 budgets. They have $1.4 million budget now. And I heard the plan, Minister. Minister, your plans are not, Minister, your plan is unrealistic.
Honorable member, sorry to interrupt. You have 10 minutes left. So I'm just letting you know so you can wrap up. I don't just want to cut you off. So I'm just letting you have 10 minutes. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. People, I indulge a little more privilege. Give me extra 5 minutes, Mr. Speaker, because of the technical difficulties and the
Opposition leader,
process.
10 minutes where you asked me if I know you could have continued speaking because you're not going to get it. So please continue.
Okay, I hope we're consistent, Mr. Speaker. And I'm used to this anyway, because that's the modus operandi of this house anyway. I'm not surprised. There's no privilege for the opposition leader in this house. It's not about me. It's about the position, Mr. Speaker. The level of privilege that this position should have in this honorable house. But I'm used to it by now. The people are as well. Mr. Speaker, the sewage, they continue to beat a drum about sewage. $65,000 is what them spend on sewage for 4 budgets. They care about the people. We had a big ceremony up there, a big show in front of the police station. I asked for the numbers for when I was elected. From day one, millions of dollars I poured in to put the infrastructure in place from Paramtown, come down to Greenland and address all those areas down there. When I got elected. It's not a show for me. For me, it's about my people and making sure that my people get better than they have. There's not ulterior motives for me, Mr. Speaker. My fight is for the people of this country. But we played Dolly House with my people. And the member for the 7th sit there and let them just take the money, pay for legal fees, do all kind of nonsense with the money. Well, our people up there running in sewage. Are we serious? So what is, I asked again for a report on where and how the $6 million that came back from the port of the BVI Port Authority. How was that spent and where is the money? Up to now, you can't hear where that money is. It's just convenient how certain reports don't come to the members, you know. But we don't intervene with those things, but we intervene to shut down opposition. We intervene when we stand in finance enough from the opposition, when members on the government side go on infinitum, talking. This institution is compromised. We need to deal with the issues of sewage and not stop talking about it. I want the evidence of what I spent when I was there. It needs to come forward. Don't hide it. Don't hide it. In 4 years, in 4 budgets, you spent $65,000. And you say you care about Eastern Lalo people? Bring the information forward. Don't hide why hiding it for. Bring it forward. Bring it forward. I ain't gonna be silent. And I ain't gonna be limited to 2 hours when I go outside and I start to speak. Bring the information forward. Stop playing with the games with the minds of the people of our community. Stop playing games with their minds. You have $1 million budgeted. That even can't put the force main in place. For 4 years, we're trying to get the plant at Board Point fixed. Can't get fixed. The plant in Park, they're being walking now. How you gonna get that fixed? and you only have a $1.5 million budgeted. You're playing games with the minds of the people. There's no real intent to address the issue. If there was an intent of addressing the issue, the money would have reflected in the budget. The money is not there in the budget. And $6 million came back into the government coffers from the $8 million. So where the money is? That's what we use to pay the lawyers in? That's what we use it for? Playing games with my people. My people, don't be fooled. Don't fall for the smoke and mirrors. You're in, we're more intelligent than 90 Eastern Long. We eat our school fee. You can't play with the minds of our people. Don't come back with that tired old $8 million story again. You don't take back six and you give the court a reprieve for two. And all you spend out of it is $65,000? Huh? Then want to come play games with the minds of my people? Well, they have to deal with the issue. And then making it seem like as if I have the money, I have access to the money to deal with the projects when we all know the way government system works. I can issue no projects in that community. Even a very bush cut, and I want to at this time thank the Deputy Speaker for respecting my sovereignty and respecting the people of the 8th District for who they have elected to represent them. When the Deputy Speaker wants anything to be done in that district, he comes to me and has a conversation. He says, honorable colleague, I want to do X, I want to do Y, I want to do Z. And we sit down, we talk, we work it out, and we find out way to help the people. I represent all the people of the 8th District, not because you only vote for me. I represent all the people. And I've been that way from day one when I was elected. But there are those who want to come up there and get private citizens involved in the middle of our politics and to undermine my authority in my community and disrespect my people who elected me to represent their interests. When I live in the 7th District. If I want anything done, I call my cousin. I say, cuz, I need X, Y done. Let me work together, get it done. I don't undermine his authority in his community. So a large member, be warned. We come from the
Honorable,
same,
Honorable,
we
you
come
have
from the
three
same
minutes.
background.
You have three
Don't
minutes
try to undermine me in my community. On that note, I'm being
to
cut
wrap up.
off. So
I
I'll
ain't
sit
cutting
with,
you off. I'll give you a chance that you
I'll
could
sit.
give your stuff out, please. I am cutting you off. I give you a chance to say what you have to say. Just letting you know that it's time to close off so you could
Okay.
I'm cutting you
I
off.
appreciate that, honorable member.
Thank
You
you.
know, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. I know you come from good family. And you always gonna do the right thing. If it was another man in the seat, we had a different story. But God knows. God don't make no mistake. He always makes the right decisions. He never make a mistake. So on that note, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the good people of the 8th District again, and I can't say this enough, for your constant prayers and encouragement, for your support of me over the last 10 years as your representative. It doesn't go unnoticed the love I have for the community, that community, and the people of that community. In fact, the love that I have for the entire Virgin Islands. All of us, and I believe this to be true, Mr. Speaker, all 13 of us, elected members in this house, we're here because we love people. We genuinely love people and we love to represent the interests of our people in our country. Despite our differences back and forth in our methodologies and how we think things should be done, at the end of the day, I believe that all of us have a genuine love and care and concern for the people of this country, Mr. Speaker. I want to also say to the families who are bereaved, who've lost loved ones in this very difficult season. It's always difficult to lose a loved one, particularly around the Christmas season. I really want to express my condolences to all the families, the ones who have lost loved ones to COVID, to other illnesses and tragedy. This weekend we'll be burying my little brother Gavin, G Money Gavin Richards, on Saturday. And he was all of us, we have our differences, and then we have all our challenges. But Gavin was a kind spirit, someone who cared about the community, cared about the people, and always giving of himself, of the community and to the people. I just want to express condolences to his family and the extended Lalo community. We have a few initiatives coming up on my behalf in the community. We'll have more information on that in the coming days and weeks. Days actually, put up more information in terms of what persons could do. We have a distribution drive going on later this week for needy families within the community. We have a large registration
Th-
of persons already registered. So we look forward to really persons coming out, some camaraderie. And I want to thank the Premier for his support. We're having our Christmas event coming up for persons within the community to have some level of camaraderie, safe within COVID protocols to make sure that persons have some type of Christmas cheer around this time. I want to thank the Premier as well for making the monies available for us to be able to clean up the community and bring some kind of Christmas cheer and cleanliness to the person to make sure people who, even though we're going through a difficult time and we're down in spirit, that persons, at least with the uplift of the community, persons have a little bit of uplifting of their spirits during this Christmas season. And then all those persons who have opted to put up lights to embrace the Christmas spirit and to raise your spirits during this season. It's been a difficult season for everyone. I want to really thank you for doing that for persons who are less fortunate within the community. And in this Christmas season, what I would ask is that give back something to someone. I know it's difficult for everyone, but those who can give something to a family that you know needs it more than you do right now. Give back whether it's a meal, a grocery voucher, or something to assist the family in need during this season. I know there are a lot of persons who are displaced, persons who are sleeping in areas that are not a conducive environment. I want you to hold firm. Let us work together to get through this very difficult time for all of us as we go through this process. Again, I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the additional couple of minutes to talk to the people of the Virgin Islands. And I again thank the people of the Virgin Islands, the people of the 8th District, and people of the wider Virgin Islands for your support and your encouragement and your prayers over the last 10 years and hopefully beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Marlon Penn, Leader of the Opposition, Member of the 8th District. It is going to be the same for every one member. I am going to continue to give the same directive I'm giving now because we all agreed on it, and I'm going to keep it that way. With that, we're going to break this Honorable House until tomorrow, 10 o'clock, 10 a.m., the 15th. This House is now in recess.